Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, living in alignment with your soul. Our guest is Dr. Victoria Shaw, an intuitive counselor and spiritual coach who combines her Ivy League training in psychology and counseling with intuitive guidance to help clients heal, grow, and realize their full potential. She is the author of 4 self-help books for parents, children, and teens. She's the host of Intuitive Connection podcast and the star of Living in Alignment on Soul Search TV. She has founded a retreat in Hidden Meadows, California, and she has a lot to offer you to help you realize your full potential. And now, Carefree and Conscious, living in alignment with your soul. Victoria Shaw, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. It is fascinating to me to have a Princeton-trained psychologist walk into the field side by side with us of auras and intuition and the clairs and all those sorts of things. I really appreciate your teaching style. I like the grounding. There's so many things that I like. But first, I would really like to share with the listeners and the viewers on YouTube what made you switch from you could have had this academic career going for up until retirement. You could have been like private practice, traditional. What triggered the switch in you?
Wow, that's a great question. And it's a switch, but it's also like not a switch, because I think that for my whole life I was sort of guided by spirit. I was guided by this deeper sense of purpose. And what I was trying to do for a long time is sort of stick that into the 3D human world and make it work. And I did the best that I could. And that's why I ended up, and I also came from a family that really prioritized being smart. So I think, that's part of also what led me to get that PhD from Princeton and a few extra degrees after that. But what I was really trying to do was answer these deep longings that, I think I had as a soul. I wanted to understand how people understood the world. I wanted to understand, like, what is consciousness? I wanted to understand, like, our life's purpose and our journey. I wanted to understand the relationship between the mind and, the physical body, and what I now recognize as our spirit or soul. Back then, I thought mind and body was all the only 2 things that there were. But I did not have a spiritual perspective. I was raised with 0 spiritual upbringing. My dad was Jewish. My mom was kind of mixed, but spirituality wasn't like a thing. And so I didn't really know what that was called until much later in my journey, when I left academia, because I just found that those big questions that I wanted to ask were not things that you could ask in the lab doing research on undergraduates. And I lost my passion. And it was the kind of field where I was working at such a high level. And, there's not a lot of monetary payback from being a college professor. So, you just work your tail off. And I felt like, gosh, I can't do this at this level if I'm not passionate about it. This is something you do because you love it. And so I stopped loving it. And so that's really what made me make that shift. I just knew my passion was gone, and I recently had gotten married, and I knew I wanted to start a family. And I said, okay, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I wrote a couple books, and then I started my family. And it was that journey that triggered my awakening, because I wasn't the kind of mom that I wanted to be. I was showing up. I was really stressed. I was grouchy. I was overwhelmed, and it led me to, wanting to be the best mom I could be, sent me on this journey where I started to discover this whole world that I didn't know existed. I had this out of the box pediatrician, and he sent me to energy healers and acupuncturists and medical intuitives and astrologers. And I didn't even know this stuff existed, but it worked. And
Gee.
Yeah. And that's what did it. That's what changed my life. And then looking back, the reason I say it's a shift that wasn't a shift, because looking back, I say, oh my God, that thing I was doing in philosophy class as an undergrad, where I went to the space beyond words to get the answers to the questions that we were discussing and bring them back and translate them into the words so I could share, that was channeling. I've been doing this my whole life. I just didn't know what it was called. Right. I didn't know what it was. And so once I freed, myself up to recognize that I had all these tools in my toolbox that I've been using all along, and now I knew what they were called, it just opened, the doorway, and I've never looked back.
Well, how does your breadth and scope of understanding of psychology and then neuropsychology inform you as a teacher now?
I love that question. And like the way that I see it is, before the way I don't think I ever did this way, but you're kind of taught that you're supposed to, right? When you have a question, when you have something that you want to do, even like training, like a skill, like psychotherapy, right? And that was my second degree. So my first degree was in research psychology, which is a different thing, but we're taught to sort of go through, the Rolodex in our mind and like figure out what we know. And, it's this slow and complicated flow chart that kind of works, but ultimately it slows us down. And the way that I work now is that I follow my intuition first and foremost. I tune into that higher wisdom, to that higher guidance. I let that lead the show. And then there are times in a session or times, in a forum such as this, like Susanne, where I'll be like, my guides will be like, that thing that tell them that. And so it's all in there, right? And sometimes there are things that I know that I didn't even learn in this body, right? But I still know them. And so my guides will point that out too. So I haven't forgotten all that beautiful training that I have, but I just use it a little more loosely and a little bit more in service of my higher knowing, because I find that it works much better that way. And it's a much more seamless and rewarding process. And yeah. So does that answer the question?
It really does, and it just leads me to a whole lot more questions. Yeah, I mean, you're fascinating.
Oh, thanks. Likewise.
Well, here's the deal. So many people are concerned about that phrase, monkey mind. Is it monkey mind? Is it my fear? Is it my
Right.
intuition? What am I acting upon here? We all want to be mindful of, what we're receiving and how to receive it. It seems to me that you would probably have some of the best ideas around distinguishing monkey mind from intuition.
Yeah. And the first thing I want to say is I love having a mind. I love having a mind. And I spent, the first big chunk of my life studying how the mind works. That's what cognitive psychology is. It's literally studying how our minds work. And I love it. And I'm really glad that I have one. And I also am glad that I understand basically what the mind is designed to do. We tend to use it, or confuse it with all sorts of things, including our very own sense of self and identity, which is not what it is. But the mind is a beautiful tool for letting us have this 3D experience. And I don't know about you, but I like being here. I like having conversations. I like being rooted in the 3D world to a certain degree, because it lets me have this human experience. It lets me experience things like the illusion of time, right? It lets me have this sense of identity, right? I am Victoria Shaw, the lady with letters after my name, who's also a psychic, right? But I take those things loosely now. Like I don't get lost in them. I don't confuse them for who and what I really am. It's just part of this game, part of this virtual reality that I've agreed to plug into. And that is a really fun and a fine thing to do. So that's the first thing. I love having a mind. The downside is, where I think we've gotten lost as, a culture, humanity, where the monkey mind comes in, is we tend to confuse our identity with that voice in our head, that the socially conditioned voice in our head, right? The mind, that's the monkey mind. And much of it's fear-based, because unfortunately, up until now, most of our human society, most of what we've learned in those first 7 years of life, where we develop this sense of self and this mind-made way of understanding and perceiving reality, most of that's fear-based. There's just a lot of fear in there. So I love having a mind, but I don't get lost in it as much anymore, right? That mindful piece, I've learned to put some space between myself and my constant chitter chatter. And I've also learned to tune into the signs of what is mind and what feels like spirit, soul communicating with me. Right. And I think part of that is knowing your own triggers, your own journeys, your own stories. And sometimes we learn those over time, right? Sometimes, it's like peeling the onion. All of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's another belief system that I didn't realize I had. Um, and part of it is also just, and you know this, feeling into the kind of feeling or the flavor tone of what your intuition and what your guidance feels like. It feels delicious. It feels delightful. It feels freeing. It feels calm, peaceful, loving. And when you start to know what that feels like and flow with that, the mind just becomes like a little bit of a whisper in the background. It's not so loud anymore. Right. And when it does get loud, I just ride it out. I'm just like, okay, this is definitely not what my soul feels like, but it's really loud right now. So I'm just going to hold myself through that. And eventually the storm will pass and I'll reconnect.
Well, shifting gears a tiny bit, and that was a great explanation, by the way. I can remember I did 3 semesters in a PhD program, and it was human resources development, which is, human capital, intelligence, emotional intelligence. And I was working full time. Victoria, I felt like during that time, I never looked up at the sky the whole time. You're so involved in research, and it was so great. But I learned how to do solid research, and I learned how to read papers and glean, um, distill things down into their essence. And I love seeing all the academic papers coming out over the last decade about our intelligence and consciousness and where is consciousness. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship of consciousness, the mind, and you were mentioning like our personality and our thoughts and how that all plays into how we receive intuition? Like where is our consciousness?
Ooh, that's a big question. I don't know if science is totally totally got
We're
there
getting
yet.
there.
Yeah, the old time way of thinking about things was this materialist paradigm. And this was me sitting in philosophy class trying to understand the mind body problem, which was fascinating to me. Right. And it's this idea, right, that if the material world is like all there is, then how do we get consciousness? Where does that come from? Right. And spirit was not something that we talked about. Right. So it was, how do you make the mind, right, consciousness, because they confuse those two things. I don't think that's the same thing, an emergent property from all this material stuff. And many scientists still believe that. They believe that our consciousness, our awareness comes from physical, from the matter. So that means that when you die and your brain stops functioning, voila, your consciousness, doesn't exist. Now you are a medium and I am a medium. So we know from experience, direct experience, this is not the case. And that our consciousness is not an emergent factor from the body. In fact, quantum physics will show us, and this is becoming, mainstream now. So I think that paradigm is about to flip, that actually matter is an emergent property from consciousness, right? So it's the other way around. There's this little pyramid that we used to think matter was at the bottom, but no, it's everything emerges from consciousness. And when we understand that, everything changes. And then we understand that we are the consciousness that is creating the material world that we are experiencing, right? And that is a total game changer. That is a total game changer. And then the mind body problem ceases to be a problem, right? Because you are not, this dumb, unexplainable result of the neurons in your brain, right? You are bigger than that. So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question.
I think you're speaking to the emergence of our recognition of who we truly are. And the materialist scientists, if we look back over the last 120 years of, we can call it afterlife research or research into other dimensions or consciousness, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different organizations, agencies studying this now. What we're coming to understand is we're part of a process rather than sort of like an anomalous individual sitting without our personal sovereignty, without free will. I mean, free will is always involved. And
Yeah.
there's also some things that we seem to have to, or seem to want to, as souls experience here on earth.
Yes.
And some of that's great, some of it's painful. So you talk about soulful living, and
Right.
I want to ask you before, telling us what that is, did you start to talk about soulful living as a way to cope from a psychological framework, or did you think of it as a way to evolve? How did that start with you? And then tell us what soulful living is.
Oh my goodness. I got to think about that because I was still going to the second part of the question that you asked.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
okay. I think I'm just so excited. I'm probably throwing a lot at you.
I love it.
'Cause
I love it.
I need this conversation. My students need this conversation, and we need more of this conversation. So you know what, Victoria, go where you want to go right
You're
now.
beautiful.
It's all good.
We're gonna do two things. We're gonna do two things. I'm gonna
Yes,
piggyback after.
professor.
You're awesome. I'm so glad we get to have this conversation, my friend. It's so delightful. So, you asked before where intuition comes from. And I think that it's important to clarify that before we go into the soulful living, which for me is living in alignment with your higher self, with your intuition, following those soul-based nudges, as much as possible. So it's living according to your intuitive knowing. But again, in order to do that, let's just understand where intuition comes from and how, because you asked me, that question. And again, I can't necessarily give this to you in scientific terms, but I can tell you what my guides have shown me. And my guides are really good at, tuning into what I know as a scientist, and then also just, speaking out of my lips, which is what I prefer the very most. And what they've explained to me is that, your mind, the human mind, is like a filter. And in about the first 7 years of life, and I know this from studying developmental psychology, which is something else that I did at another Ivy League on the graduate level, right? In the first 7 years of life is where we really start to, we develop language. We develop conceptual awareness. It's really where we get rooted into this 3D reality. Okay. And what's really happening during that time is your brain is actually losing connectivity, right? You think about development is growing, but actually what's happening is the neuronal connections, the little nerve fibers that are doing all the work in your brain, are actually winnowing down all the possible ways that we can know things. They're actually losing connectivity. And what this speaks to is this idea that your brain is a filter, particularly the left side of your brain, which is where we get that linear, logical sense of selfie kind of thing that we're talking about, the monkey mind, or I like to say like the mind, which again is a good thing to have. But either way, we start to, filter our reality through these five senses, through this way that we are allowed to know things, right? You can know things this way. You can't know things that way. This is a table. This is a chair, right? This is my smell. This is my taste. This is my touch, right? And so that's how we get that 3D way of knowing. But your brain and your energy being is picking up on all sorts of other information all the time. It's all there. It's all informing us. Everyone's intuitive. Everyone's picking that up. Just most of the time we're going like this. When we start to expand our awareness again, right? That's where intuition happens. We start to expand our awareness, and we also start to, and I want to get this from the guides, purposely tap into those higher channels, right? The soul channel, because you're picking up energy of everything, right? Empaths know we feel other people's feelings. We feel the energy of a place. We can hear other people's thoughts, all this. And you're tabulating that information all the time. That's in part what psychologists call the adaptive unconscious, which to me is different than your intuition. Your intuition is that pinging up to your higher self. Okay. And so when we learn to tune into those higher bandwidths, those higher channels, and listen to that and follow that and flow with that, that's when life gets really exciting and delicious. And that's when we start to, as you just asked, live that more soul-guided life. And you can still pick up all that other information. You can still talk to other people and solve math problems and do your taxes. If you so choose, you can still be in the 3D world. but you start to anchor yourself more into the love channel, into the soul channel, right? Into the spirit channel, and less into the fear and the pain channels, which is what I think most of us have been acculturated and conditioned to do up until now. Does that make sense? That was a lot.
Yeah, it's a helpful reminder that we're on autopilot a lot. The adaptive consciousness is, we hear teachers talk about this as getting up and doing the same things every day, thinking about the same subjects, if not the same thoughts. And it's just a small part of who we are. So when we want to shift away from the worldly matters and maybe feel more of our true selves, I mean, I know you have tips.
Yes, ma'am.
For that, and I know you teach a lot of things, and you have the books, and I know you have a television show and all of that. Is there a couple things that you could share now?
Number one is you got to learn to quiet the mind. So I've been extolling how great the mind is as a tool to use, except that if you don't know how to quiet it, you won't find all the other space, which is where you truly reside, right? So learning to quiet the mind is so important because that's where we access our expanded consciousness. And that's where we can start to use the mind as a tool rather than being used by it, which is the experience that so many of us have. So the first tip is always to learn to quiet the mind. That can be meditation. That can be, I'm not a meditator, by the way. Sometimes I do it, but that's not my biggest approach. Spending time in nature, doing things that you love, that just bring you joy when you're really in the flow, moving your body, according to intuition, or sometimes just for me, it's going for a walk at the beach. Sometimes people find in the bath, in the shower, right? Being around water is another one, but anything that quiets your mind awakens your deeper consciousness, right? It connects you automatically to your soul-based self. So that is like the first tip. And then the second one is just, start to know what your mind is like, right? And just, have some grace with yourself, have some love with yourself, but don't necessarily believe everything you think. Right? Many of us do. We believe all of our thoughts so hard that they drive us crazy and they cause us so much misery. So I would say if a thought does not feel good to you, have some skepticism. It's probably not true, or it doesn't have to be true, right? You may, because we are all powerful creators and we are creating our own reality at every moment of time. What you believe might be what you experience in the 3D world up until now. But if it's not feeling good, right, have some skepticism. Know that it may not be inevitable. It may not be truthful. So don't take your thoughts so seriously, right? That's thought number 2. That's tip number 2. And then my guys are giving me a different thing, and they're saying, learn to have some love for yourself, right? They're saying self-love is so important. We love the monkey mind. We love ourselves. We love the human experience. We treat ourselves with kindness rather than disdain. If you're sitting in meditation and your mind won't shut up, right? You don't beat yourself up. You just notice that, oh my goodness, sweetheart, your mind is very active today. I love you so much. So that's the other piece. And you as soon as I said that, right, your whole energy shifts and you realign, right? Because that loving stance is the soul stance.
Yeah, I got that immediately. And clairvoyantly, I see funnels in the field around people who channel. And as you were talking about those tips, you had 3 funnels.
I love that.
And I'm like, that's interesting, because I don't remember seeing that before. So it's like the team is stepping forward with you, which is really cool. And I know you don't mind me saying that. It's like,
I love that because
I
I don't see energy. So that's so validating, because my guides sometimes call themselves, like one of my guides call themselves the 3 wise ones. So
okay. Well,
the 3 funnels was like very cool.
That definitely, that makes a lot of sense. Another thing that caught my attention is that you especially like to work with people who are taking some of the worst things that could possibly happen to a human being and using that to create wisdom and propel themselves forward. instead of you saying good vibes only, it's all love and light, focus on the positive, you're like, yes, but these other things that have happened are so useful to you. Let's work from there. What attracts you to doing that kind of work?
So, I think many of us on the light workery type journey up until now, and I do think this is optional, we didn't maybe have the easiest start. I didn't have the easiest start, right? I can speak of them freely now that they're past, but I did not have, I did not win the parent lottery by human terms, though probably in soul terms, I trust that I had exactly the childhood that I needed. But those experiences for me set me up for some powerful gains later on, right? Because in healing that and understanding that and overcoming that and all of those things, right? It gave me so much awareness and so much perspective, right? And so I'm very grateful for every human experience that I have. What I'm learning to do more and more now is, I don't have a program running that says life has to be hard to be valuable, right? Like, I think life gets to be fun as much as possible. And I'm definitely plugged into that. But I also recognize that we're human beings. And up until now, the human world has worked, oftentimes by exploring, understanding who we are by experiencing who we are not. And that's just part of the game. And so, my doors are open to anyone that wants to experience their life more from that soul-based perspective. And sometimes what opens the door for us to want to do that is hardship and difficulty, because those are those moments when we say, I don't know what else to do. Help me. I'm going to go talk to a psychotherapist. Right. So people often find me in times of crisis or in times of difficulty or in times of questioning, because those are the times that they are most open to really say, okay, I'm ready to try anything. Okay. And I also think that those are the times when so many of us are waking up and saying, look, I want to understand the soul message in all of this. I want to find that deeper meaning and purpose in my life, especially when life feels hard. And so I like to hold that door open for people, right? And help them say, yes, my sweet friends, you are still a soul. You are still beautiful. You are not doing anything wrong. You are still loved by your higher self, your soul, and your guides. And let me help you to experience that more and more so that you can get yourself back on track and you can see the goodness in what's happening for you right now. And so, yes, all peoples are welcome. And I also have clients that are wildly successful and happy. And they just call me for an energy check, or, because they want insights from their guides on, where to invest their billions of dollars or whatever. I'm open to
Yeah.
that too. It's all good. And, we are all, human beings that have a variety of experiences. So it is not, it's just not, does not make any sense to say that you're going to be happy and positive all the time. It's important to understand that, the goal can be to feel good. I think that is the primary goal by which I live my life. I want to feel good as much as I possibly can, because that's what I am here for. But when I don't feel good, I don't consider that a fail. I just consider that life.
Look, this brings up in my mind LOA, law of attraction.
Yes.
We gotta get to this. There seems to be this continuum of, okay, I made a vision board and stuck it in my drawer. It's going to sit in my drawer, but I'm going to attract all these things. A continuum all the way to something bad happened to me. What did I do to attract that? And then somewhere in the middle is taking steps towards those goals, watching for signposts to guide you, synchronicities and things like that. What's your approach to teaching law of attraction?
A loving one. I was not someone who was really into the law of attraction until about 4 or 5 years ago, particularly when I moved to San Diego and discovered I did a deep dive into the teaching of Abraham Hicks, which I was aware of, but didn't feel a resonance with. But I did a deep dive after moving to San Diego, and you can't make this stuff up, Susanne, discovered that I actually live on the same street that Esther lived on when she lived in San Diego. So they were calling to me. She no longer lives here, so I've not met her in person, but it was just a crazy synchronicity, right? So I have become all in on the law of attraction, but not understanding it from that ego-based, like, I've got to get what I want kind of thing. And also not that ego based. If I don't get what I want, I'm doing something wrong. And I got to give myself a hug because that's so ouchy. Right. But from understanding that the law of attraction, like gravity, it's just a fundamental law of the universe. It's how everything works. And when we understand it, then we can fly our planes and understand like how to create what we want to create more deliberately and more consciously and be more in the flow with our highest and truest selves. But it's not about judging yourself or your experiences as good or bad, or right or wrong. In fact, I would not invite that. It's about tuning in more and more to what brings you joy, to following that flow, to listening to your intuition, to following that guidance, and then recognizing that in so doing, your life will unfold in the most beautiful and magical way possible. Because, that's how the law of attraction works, right? When we are focusing on what feels good, more good things flow our way.
Do you support creating vision boards?
Oh, ma'am, hold on. I will show you.
For our listeners, I think she's
yeah.
going to show us something.
Yeah. So I did a bunch. Yes, I do. I was invited. Sorry, I'm banging all over the place. So this was my vision board, or part of my vision board. And it says on here, because you can't see it, love what you do. Oh, do what you love and love what you do is part of
Okay, now here, help me out, because I thought vision boards where you get a bunch of print magazines or print things, pictures off, cut them up, and this is what I want my partner to look like. She's going to look like this, or he's going to look like this. This is my new house, and you just paste a whole bunch of things together. What you just showed us for listeners is a beautiful art object with a gorgeous, colorful butterfly and an affirmation. How is that a vision board?
So first of all, vision boards are not, they can be. Many of people think a vision board is sort of like, my wish list for Santa Claus. I'm going to write down a bunch of things that I want, tell the universe, because the universe doesn't already know. The universe already knows. Because of the law of attraction, you are sending out pings all the time. So what you want has already been recorded. Sometimes we don't even know what we're sending out, right? And that we're going to compose this list to Santa Claus, and then we're going to get what we want. And I don't know about you, but I did not get everything on my list to Santa Claus. It's not actually how it works. What a vision board, you may get some of those things. It's about whether you believe you can have them. And if you believe hard enough, then they will arrive, right? And so sometimes a vision board at its best can get us really excited about certain things. It can get us positive thinking. If we believe it's going to work, we have a better chance of succeeding. So I love vision boards that way. I prefer to do mine more intuitively. So, because I think life is a discovery process. Sometimes we don't even know what we want. Sometimes we have a vague idea. And again, the idea of a vision board really is to get you excited and positive and juiced up. If you look at the energy in this, and I did a bunch of these this year, like that's what I go for. It's like the energy in it. And I don't have any examples here, but I do energy art all the time too. If I'm traveling, say, and I want it to go smoothly, or just I want to have fun, I'll do like a little picture of, say I'm going to Connecticut. I draw Connecticut and I put some words about how I want to feel when I'm in Connecticut and things that I'm excited about, and, smooth travels. And it's about juicing myself up and focusing my energy towards that which I want to experience. Right. And so you can definitely do this collage style. I have one of those from last year, and actually most of those things have occurred. So yay. But a lot of times too, I like to even do that more intuitively, where, I start to just get the magazine, see what I'm drawn to, let my mind go soft. Don't think too hard about what I think I want. Just see what pops out at me and let that vision board create itself. And that's what happened here. This was a retreat that we just did last weekend, and it was an art project that a friend of mine did, and she just had tons of art projects and colors and affirmations and images, and these are the ones that called to me and spoke to me. And I love this, right? I love this because this is exactly how I want to experience my world this year, doing what I love, loving what I do, life, love, friendship, and trust, and the beautiful butterfly, right, coming into herself, right? So this to me summarizes how I'd like to feel in 2025. And oftentimes we want to focus mostly on how we want to feel, because the more we can feel like that now, the more we can bring in things resonant with that. That's how the law of attraction works.
Focus on what you want to heal.
Feel.
Okay.
Feel,
Feel,
feel.
feel,
Yes.
and the healing will come.
Yeah. Healing for me is when we focus sometimes on what we want to heal, we're focusing on what we think is broken. If
Ooh,
we're
that's that.
focusing on what,
Let's say it again.
if you focus on what you want to heal, sometimes you're thinking about the problem and what you think is broken. And
Okay.
unfortunately, when we focus on the problem, what we tell the energy is problem, 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 right? Because we're focusing our energy on what we think is wrong. It's okay to a certain extent because, you can't find the solution until you recognize the problem. So that's just part of life. But the problem is that most people get stuck there and we just keep rehashing the problem over and over again. This is wrong. That is wrong. My health is wrong. This problem is wrong. I'm lonely. I'm this, I'm that. And unfortunately, in that state, what you are projecting out to the universe is lonely problem, ouch, 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 ouch. And so you keep perpetuating that experience. Gotta take a breath because that doesn't feel good. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's heavy, but it's real. You're being so
Yeah.
real with us.
Yeah. So when we can focus on what feels good, right? Even if it's just a little touch of something that feels good. And by the way, it does not have to be on the topic that the problem is, right? So if your problem right now is your health, right? But man, you have the best relationship. Your romantic partner makes, focus on how awesome that is, how supported and loved and in the flow that you feel in this romantic relationship. Put your energy there and you will find that as you feel into what is flowing naturally and normally without, very much effort on your part, those areas that feel a little bit clogged will start to move. Right? And so the vision board is for me about focusing this way, focusing on how I want to feel and getting myself juiced up and excited about what feels good. And, when I look at this, I feel good. If you look at your vision board and you see, the great relationship and $1 million and the trip to Tahiti, and all you think about is, I don't have those things and I'll never have those things. Your vision board is not going to work. Okay. Because when you look at it, you're going to feel bad. Right? So you want to focus on and all law of attraction tools on things that make you feel good and inspired and ready and excited because that's the energy from which we create.
So go to sleep even at night with
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of those things already accomplished.
Yes.
Okay, focusing on the feeling. If you're looking at
Yeah.
the vision board, thinking, well, I'm never going to get this, but I made this board and I sure hope it works. The universe here is never going to get this.
Yeah. I would say if that's your energy, don't do the vision board. Try something else. Focus on what in your life is already bringing you joy. Right?
Do
Maybe
you
it's
use
this.
crystals?
Yeah, they're in my background too.
Are they decorative or do you feel that they have properties?
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Okay.
I feel in the energy of crystals all the time. I use them intuitively. And then sometimes if I'm really drawn to something, I'll open a book and see what it's supposed to do. But yeah, I love all of that stuff. Again, I live intuitively, so I just follow the flow. I follow the flow as much as I possibly can. And, it hasn't steered me wrong yet.
Have any of your old colleagues ever reached out and said anything like, I wish I could do what you're doing, or, just found you now in your new iteration within this life?
Oh, that's such a good question. My old colleagues from Princeton, no. I was actually reaching out to someone who lives in LA when I was visiting. He lives right near where the Conscious Life Expo was. And I was like going to reach out and see him. And he's like, oh, what are you in town for? And I told him, and then I didn't hear from him again. So I don't know if that was a coincidence,
Yeah,
but
because
but
people are busy,
yeah, it
just,
could just
yeah,
be that he has a
yeah,
busy life for sure. Or it could be
yeah.
that, that didn't vibe with him. But definitely I'm surprised at people that climb out of the woodwork, especially like from high school,
Yep.
like just random people that come and like, follow my podcast or, have said how impactful the teachings have been or have, done sessions. That's been really surprising or come to retreats. I had someone from high school come to one of my two people from high school come to my retreats. So that's really surprising, and I think, those are probably long-term soul connections too, right? They weren't necessarily my best friends in high school, but just, But we're all on this journey together. So I think, we definitely find people and find each other. But then there are also people, from my past that probably their minds would explode if they knew what I do nowadays. And that's okay too. That's okay too. Because, I want everyone to be exactly where they're at and having the experience that they're here to have. And it doesn't really impact me or the choices I make or the experience that I want to have.
Do you ever get upset for very long about world events?
Great question. I really try not to. Is obviously a challenge right now. But what I've learned is that the more I unplug, the better. And in those moments that I do get triggered, rather than hopping in and having the story in my head about this is wrong and that's the bad guy and they're terrible and this is terrible, is to soothe the fear and what's stored up inside me. So that's what I do. I just say it's okay. This is how life is. I know it's scary right now. I know you're hurting a little bit. I love you. And we'll just keep following that North Star, and that will always guide us. And so that's what
And
I do. And I unplug as much as possible, which some
yes.
people feel is not okay. They feel like you must know what's going on to be safe and to be informed. And if that's you, that's fine. But for me, I find that not helpful at all. I find unplugging is the best way to go because I understand the law of attraction. What we focus on grows. So if I am putting my energy on what's so terribly wrong with the world and the country right now, then I'm putting my energy in the place that I really don't want it to flow. So
So
in
that
the,
like a balance. It sounds
yeah,
like a balance between being ignorant and being obsessed with
yeah,
news.
yeah. I go for ignorance. I mean, it's hard to be completely ignorant,
Yeah.
because it's just everywhere. But again, I just try to tune in and I really trust my own inner wisdom and I really trust my own guidance. And I try to listen to and follow that and look at everything in that outside world as a call to serve. And so,
Ooh, wait. You got to go back,
okay,
rewind, really look at everything in the outside world as
a call to serve,
a call
to
to
serve.
serve.
And so I ask myself each time I feel triggered, each time I feel pulled into, someone else's dysfunction, is this something that I am, what is my call to serve right now? And
Mm.
a lot of times my call to serve is to hold my very own highest vibration because we need more of that than anything else right now. So sometimes I just stay out of it and I tune back into my own highest and truest self. I connect with my guides and I say, I love this world. I love myself. I trust, I trust, I trust, I trust, I trust. And then I let it go. And then other times that call to serve might be to do something, to have a conversation, not usually, but to send some love in a certain direction, right? And so I listen to that and I follow my intuition. If my intuition says, yeah, you could have a conversation about this, I will. Sometimes my guides are prompting me. Sometimes too, I need to have a conversation with them about stuff, right? In order to hold my highest and truest vibration. But more and more, I feel that my call to serve during this time is to help people stay true to themselves and to stay out of the drama and trauma and hold those higher vibrations for ourselves and others. Because I think that that's really what we need to do right now, as tempting as it is to jump into the problem and to be afraid. And there's lots of things to be afraid of, if we let our minds go there. I think the deeper call right now is for us to find our peace, even, amidst all the chaos.
Finding our peace amidst chaos.
Yeah.
And so that is a natural byproduct from everything that you've said of learning what your intuitive voice feels like, sounds like, and then trusting it. So, what would you like to leave us with today, and how do people work with you? It's all linked below on all the platforms, but how would you like to leave us now?
First of all, I want to thank you, Susanne, because this was one of my all-time favorite interviews, and your questions were just so beautiful and so inspiring. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to share some of this stuff. It's giving me tingles all over. So thank you for being you and for doing this.
My pleasure.
And then, if you want to work with me, find me. There's so many ways. I offer one-to-one intuitive coaching and counseling sessions to folks all over the world. And that's how you can tap into your soul-based, understanding of life, while life is happening. So it's where we can start to reconcile that human self and our higher selves and live the life more from that soul-based lens. So I do that for people all over the world via Zoom and in person for folks in San Diego. And I travel sometimes too, especially to the Northeast in New York and Connecticut. So you can find me sometimes in person there as well. I have my very own podcast, Intuitive Connection, and we're celebrating our 5th year at the end of this month. So I'm so excited about that. So subscribe, check that one out. I'm really proud of it. And Susanne was recently a guest, although I don't know when your episode's going live. I think it's going to be in April. So that's going to be happening. And so we have guests. I do channeled episodes. I do intuitive readings. So that's a really fun party. I have my show on Soul Search TV, which is how Susanne and I met, Living in Alignment with Dr. Victoria Shaw. And season 2 is going to be out probably also in the spring. So check that one out. That you can find on all this is on my website. And then the other thing I have going on is Cactus Blossom Retreat, which is my retreat property in Hidden Meadows, California, just outside of San Diego. And so I do a lot of teaching and retreats from that space too. And we also offer it to other soul aligned folks to do their own events. So those are all of the ways to find me and play with me. And I also teach. I don't have anything in the pipeline now. I have some self-paced classes on my website. But if you follow me and get on the mailing list, I do a lot of intuition development and law of attraction-y type teachings as well.
Fabulous. Victoria Shaw, thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media @carefreemedium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.